Did you know that nearly 65% of couples cite poor communication as the primary reason for their relationship struggles? It's staggering, isn't it? I never thought I would become part of that statistic, but I did. And it was devastating. It started small, like a tiny crack in a glass window. The kind of thing you barely notice, until one day it shatters completely. We used to talk about everything, dreams, fears, even silly things like what toppings belong on a pizza. But somewhere along the way, the words stopped coming. Or maybe, we just stopped hearing each other. I remember one night vividly. I was sitting across from my partner at the dinner table. The room was filled with the clinking of silverware and the hum of a TV playing softly in the background. Yet, it felt eerily silent. We didn't look at each other. We didn't speak. I wanted to ask him how his day was, but something stopped me. It felt pointless. He wouldn't really listen, or at least that's what I told myself. I was convinced he wouldn't care. And maybe he thought the same about me. I began to notice how empty the house felt, even when we were both home. The laughter that used to fill the rooms was gone. There were no more long conversations in bed, no spontaneous jokes, no shared excitement over the little things. It felt like living with a stranger. When words hurt or don't come at all, our few conversations became tense and guarded. We stopped discussing our emotions, our needs, even the simplest desires. Every word felt like walking on a tightrope. I was terrified of saying the wrong thing, of triggering an argument that would make the growing chasm between us even wider. I remember one argument that still echoes in my mind. I had spent hours preparing a special dinner, hoping it might rekindle some connection. But when he walked in, he barely noticed. He sat down, ate in silence, and stared at his phone. I snapped. The words came out sharp and fast, words I didn't mean but couldn't take back. He looked up, eyes filled with exhaustion, and simply said, "I can't do this anymore." He wasn't talking about the argument. He was talking about us. The loneliness of being together. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being with someone who feels miles away emotionally. Nights became my most dreaded hours. I would lie in bed, facing away from him, tears silently soaking into the pillow. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, but the fear of rejection kept me paralyzed. I would listen to his breathing, wondering if he felt as broken as I did. I began to question everything. Was I too needy? Was I expecting too much? Had I become invisible, or had I pushed him away? I analyzed every word we exchanged, every look, every gesture, trying to pinpoint the exact moment we lost each other. It was maddening. Even worse, I was ashamed. We had once been the couple everyone envied. We had love, passion, and what I thought was unshakable connection. And yet, here we were, two people drowning in the same silence, unable to save each other. The breaking point. It all came crashing down one evening when I found myself in the kitchen, alone, holding a mug of cold coffee I hadn't even realized I made. He walked in and, for the first time in what felt like months, he really looked at me. His eyes were tired, but there was something else, resignation. He asked, "Are we okay?" I wanted to scream. Of course, we weren't okay. We hadn't been okay in a long time. But instead, I just stood there, staring at him, tears welling up in my eyes. I felt so small, so helpless. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had forgotten how to communicate with the person I loved the most. If you're reading this, maybe you felt this too. That overwhelming silence, the fear, the loneliness that comes from losing the one you thought you'd always be close to. The feeling that your relationship is hanging by a thread and you don't know how to fix it. I've been there. I lived it. And the ache it leaves behind is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But this isn't where the story ends. This was my rock bottom, the point where I knew something had to change. And it did, but that's another chapter. After that night, things only got worse before they got better. We weren't speaking in anger anymore, but not out of peace either. It was more like resignation, like we both knew that silence was easier than the sting of failed words. Every day became a quiet ritual of avoidance. We went through the motions, waking up, working, eating dinner, two bodies occupying the same space, yet worlds apart emotionally. The emptiness gnawed at me like a slow poison. One day, I tried again. I sat across from him, heart racing, and said, "Can we talk?" His shoulders tensed, a familiar reaction now. "About what?" he asked, not looking up from his phone. My voice trembled as I replied, "About us." He sighed, heavily, like the weight of my words was too much to bear. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. That simple sentence broke me more than any angry outburst ever could. He wasn't angry, he was tired. Tired of trying. Tired of me. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and whispered, "Me neither." I got up, left the room, and cried alone in the bathroom. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our love. What I didn't expect was how isolated I would feel outside the relationship, too. I couldn't bring myself to tell friends or family what was happening. How could I? On the outside, we looked fine, functional, even. I laughed at the right times during group dinners, posted carefully curated photos of us looking happy, and played the role of a loving partner. But it was all a lie. The worst part was the jealousy I started to feel. Not jealousy of another person, but jealousy of other couples. I would see them in coffee shops, smiling and holding hands, talking as if they were the only two people in the world. I wanted that again. I missed the feeling of being truly seen and heard, of knowing someone cared enough to listen. I found myself wondering if we were doomed to become another failed relationship, another statistic. I couldn't stand the idea that something we once cherished so deeply could slip away without a fight. But I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't even know where to begin. I will never forget the night everything truly fell apart. It wasn't a big event or a massive argument. It was a simple, quiet moment, but it shattered me. We were watching TV together. Well, we were sitting in the same room while the TV played. I couldn't focus on the screen. My mind kept drifting to the distance between us, the gaping void where our love used to live. I turned to him and asked, "Are you happy?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screen, the glow of the television casting shadows on his face. Finally, he said, "I don't know." Those 3 words felt like a knife to the heart. I don't know. He didn't know if he was happy with me, with us. And I realized, I didn't know if I was either. We had become so lost in the fog of miscommunication and emotional detachment that we didn't even know what happiness looked like anymore. I excused myself and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tears streaming silently, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. I kept replaying that moment over and over, wondering how we had gotten here. How had we let ourselves drift so far apart? The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and an ache in my chest that felt unbearable. I couldn't do this anymore. Not like this. Something had to change. I didn't know what, or how, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. We were breaking, and if we didn't do something soon, there wouldn't be anything left to save. I wish I could tell you that I found the answers that day, that I knew exactly what to do to mend the cracks in our relationship. But I didn't. All I knew was that we were standing at a crossroads, and the path we chose next would determine everything. I sat there in the quiet, clutching a cup of coffee with trembling hands, realizing I was terrified. Terrified of losing him. Terrified of losing myself. Terrified of what it would take to heal. But I also realized something else. I was more afraid of doing nothing and letting silence destroy us completely. If you've ever been where I was, if you've felt the heavy weight of silence and the ache of disconnection, you know how suffocating it can be. It feels like drowning with no one to pull you to the surface. But this is not where the story ends. It's where it begins. The day after that crushing realization, I sat in the quiet of the early morning, staring at the soft light filtering through the window. The house was still, but the silence no longer felt like peace. It was heavy, oppressive, and suffocating. I couldn't go on like this. My relationship couldn't survive it. But more than anything, I couldn't survive it, not emotionally, not mentally. Something had to change, and for the first time, I felt ready to make that change. It wasn't an easy decision. Admitting that we had a communication problem meant confronting the fear I'd buried for so long. But I also knew that the first step to fixing anything was to admit it was broken. So I took a deep breath and decided to reach out. Later that day, I approached my partner. My hands trembled, and my throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "I think we need help." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought he would shut me down. But then, slowly, he nodded. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a start. That nod gave me a sliver of hope, and it was all I needed to move forward. We agreed to start small. No sweeping changes, no overwhelming promises. Just small, deliberate steps toward rebuilding what we had lost. And the first step? Learning how to listen. Really listen. Not just waiting for our turn to speak, not just hearing the words but understanding the emotions behind them. We began by setting aside time each day to talk without distractions. No phones, no TV, no background noise. Just us, sitting together, focusing entirely on the conversation. At first, it felt awkward, like we were learning a foreign language. But slowly, it became easier. I started to notice things I hadn't before, the subtle shifts in his tone, the way his eyes softened when he talked about something important, the quiet pauses that spoke volumes. Active listening wasn't just about hearing words, it was about being present. And for the first time in a long time, we were truly present with each other. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of frustration, but we were trying. And that effort made all the difference. Another significant step was allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. It's easy to put up walls when you're afraid of being hurt, but those walls also block out the possibility of connection. I had to let my guard down, and so did he. We began sharing things we had kept bottled up for too long, fears, insecurities, dreams we had abandoned. One night, I told him how scared I had been. How I had felt invisible, like I didn't matter. His response was raw and honest. He admitted he had felt the same way. That conversation was a turning point. It wasn't just about fixing our communication, it was about understanding each other again. As we continued to work on our communication, I realized we couldn't do it alone. We needed guidance, tools, and strategies to navigate this journey. I started researching, reading, and learning everything I could about improving communication in relationships. I found exercises that helped us practice empathy, ways to express our needs without blame, and techniques to diffuse conflict before it escalated. We also sought support from others. Talking to close friends who had been through similar struggles helped. It reminded us that we weren't alone and that relationships are rarely as perfect as they seem on the surface. Every couple faces challenges, but the ones who thrive are the ones who are willing to do the work. Slowly but surely, things began to change. The house no longer felt like a place of silence. Laughter started to creep back in, tentative at first, then stronger. We started sharing little moments again, inside jokes, lingering glances, and quiet evenings spent simply enjoying each other's company. The distance between us closed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt connected to my partner again. It wasn't a straight path. There were setbacks, days when old habits crept back in, and moments when it felt easier to give up. But each time, we chose to keep going. We chose each other. As much as we had improved, I knew we still had more to learn. That's when I discovered the communication toolkit for couples, Strengthen Your Connection. This book was unlike anything I had come across before. It didn't just offer generic advice, it provided actionable steps that were practical and easy to implement. It felt like the missing piece we had been searching for. The exercises in the book helped us deepen our understanding of each other and taught us how to navigate difficult conversations with grace and compassion. We learned how to express our feelings without fear, how to truly listen without judgment, and how to build a foundation of trust that could withstand anything. It was transformative. If you're struggling with communication in your relationship, I can't recommend this book enough. It gave us the tools we needed to rebuild our connection and transformed our relationship in ways I never thought possible. You can get a digital copy at libriffy.com, the link is in the description. Trust me, it's worth it. Reading the Communication Toolkit for Couples, Strengthen Your Connection was like opening a door to possibilities I hadn't considered before. It didn't just teach us to speak to each other, it taught us to communicate in a way that made each of us feel valued and heard. We weren't just exchanging words anymore. We were sharing pieces of ourselves with vulnerability and courage. One of the most powerful lessons we learned was the art of validating each other's feelings. This wasn't about agreeing all the time or pretending to understand every emotion. It was about acknowledging that feelings mattered, even if we couldn't always relate. I remember a moment when my partner came home visibly upset from work. Instead of offering advice or dismissing his frustration as something small, I said, "That sounds really tough. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." For the first time, he didn't shut down or change the subject. He opened up, sharing the burdens he had carried all day. In that moment, I realized that validation wasn't about solving the problem but simply being present. It created a safe space for both of us to be authentic without fear of being judged or ignored. Transformation didn't happen overnight. It was in the small, consistent actions that we found the greatest changes. One of the exercises from the book encouraged us to create a daily check-in ritual. Every evening, we would spend 10 minutes talking about our day, not just the surface-level stuff but the emotional undercurrents we often ignored. At first, 10 minutes felt like an eternity. What could we possibly have to say that hadn't already been said? But soon, those check-ins became something we looked forward to. They were a chance to reconnect after a long day, to laugh about the silly things and share the struggles without feeling the need to fix each other. It was these moments that started to rebuild our trust. I no longer felt like I was carrying the weight of our relationship alone. We were a team again, tackling life's challenges together, side by side. Another breakthrough came when we tackled one of the hardest lessons in the book, apologizing and forgiving. For years, our arguments would end with cold silence or half-hearted apologies that neither of us really believed. But we learned that a sincere apology goes beyond the words, "I'm sorry." It acknowledges the hurt, takes responsibility, and asks for forgiveness without expecting it to be given immediately. One night, after a particularly tough conversation, I found myself standing in front of him, my heart in my throat. "I know I've hurt you," I said. "I know I haven't always listened the way I should, and I'm sorry for the times I made you feel like your feelings didn't matter." The silence stretched between us, but instead of turning away, he reached for my hand. "I've made mistakes too," he said softly. "And I'm sorry." We sat there in the quiet, holding hands, feeling the weight of years of unresolved pain lifting just a little. Forgiveness didn't come all at once, but that moment was the beginning of something new. As the weeks went by, our home began to feel lighter. The laughter that had once disappeared slowly returned. We found joy in the little things, cooking dinner together, dancing in the living room, sharing inside jokes. The connection we had lost was back, stronger than ever. One evening, while we were curled up on the couch, my partner turned to me and said, "It feels different now. Better. Like we're finally on the same page." He was right. We weren't perfect, but we had become intentional in our efforts to stay connected. We had learned to prioritize each other in ways we never had before. If you're struggling in your relationship, feeling like every conversation turns into a battle or, worse, silence, know that change is possible. The Communication Toolkit for Couples, Strengthen Your Connection gave us the guidance we needed to transform our relationship. It's not just a book, it's a lifeline. The practical strategies, thoughtful exercises, and insightful lessons helped us not only to communicate better but also to truly understand each other. It taught us how to heal old wounds, build new habits, and create a relationship rooted in love and mutual respect. You can get a digital copy at libriffy.com, the link is in the description. Trust me, it will be the best investment you make in your relationship.